My husband left me alone with two small children at the airport right before our family vacation, and now he's promising to change after I told him I want a divorce. But then the story took another unexpected turn. So this is about my husband, Andrew, who is 32 years old, and me, a 30-year-old woman. We have a 3-year-old girl and a 1.5-year-old son. Some background information. Andrew and I have been married for 5 years and together for over 8 years. We met through friends and have developed in life together. Everything has been going well thus far, but he still has a lot to learn about parenting. When our daughter was born, he had no idea what was going on, so I did the majority of the job. We did have a nanny to look after her when both of us were at work, but when we were at home on weekends and other occasions, I found myself doing the majority of the work because he had no idea how to do it and was constantly saying that he was too nervous to care for the baby on his own. He gradually learned, but it took some time. I don't mind. However, even when our son was born, he struggled to adjust to having 2 children. And because he took so long to adjust to everything, I nearly felt like a single mother for a while. Every time we went outside with our kids, I did everything while he sat there. We had a few fights over it, but I decided to forgive him because I couldn't use it against him. He took his time getting used to it. But I ultimately realized that he would be a decent father, or at least I hope he would. Anyway, a few weeks ago, we decided to go on a family trip to Los Angeles. It's a beautiful town, and my sister Abby, a 26-year-old female, recently moved there with her husband, so I decided to see her as well. We had been preparing the trip for weeks because traveling with children wasn't simple. Anyway, 2 days ago we arrived at the airport, and while we were there, Andrew informed me he wanted to use the restroom and departed for a while. I expected him to return quickly, but after nearly half an hour I became concerned and called him to find out where he was. When I contacted him, he answered right away and tried to avoid answering the question. When I asked him why he hadn't returned yet, he urged me to stop it and then informed me that while reserving his flight tickets, he upgraded himself to business class because he realized he had enough points to do so. I immediately felt betrayed and upset, and I told him that this was not cool at all. But he said he knew I wouldn't approve, which is why he hadn't told me. It was a ridiculous thing to say, and it only fueled my rage. I advised him that he needed to return to his family right away. I was already irritated that he had attempted to do something like this. And now if he doesn't come back, I'll just leave home with the kids and he may go on the vacation by himself instead of returning. He began disputing with me, claiming that he had worked really hard for the family and needed a break. Furthermore, the flight was only 3 hours long, and he trusted me to handle the kids on my own. I attempted to explain to him that it wasn't all about the kids. I simply wanted him to be there with me because I thought this was meant to be a family vacation, and if it didn't get off to a good start, what was the point of going? I was quite hurt, and I attempted to express it to him, but he was so thick that he didn't even notice I was unhappy, and instead told me he deserved a break and hung up. That action really irritated me because if we are talking about people who deserve a break, I believe I should be first in line because I am also a working mom. In addition, I take care of the house and the children with minimal assistance from him. Yes, he works more hours than I do, but he also has time to unwind when he gets home, whereas I do not. So if I don't ask for a break from my family, he won't get one either. I considered returning home, but I ultimately chose to go on the trip and ensure that it was worthwhile for me. My daughter had a lot of questions about why her father wasn't with us, but I didn't answer any of them, instead telling her that once we arrived, she'd find out for herself. So we boarded the airplane on our own, and after he hung up on me, I did not speak to him again. I'm just grateful that my children chose to be quiet that day and fell asleep as soon as they boarded the airplane. When we arrived, I didn't wait for Andrew at all. I didn't even wait to get our baggage. I quickly booked a cab and went directly to the address Abby had given me. I was furious, and those 3 hours on the plane alone had made me understand how unfair everything was. So I went to my sister's place and she was delighted to see me. But when I sat down and explained the issue to her, she said I was welcome to remain with her and didn't need to worry about anything. I'd left all of my belongings behind, but I wasn't concerned because I didn't have anything vital in my luggage other than clothes and shoes, which could be readily replaced. I was just concerned about my children's belongings, but Abby assured me that she would replace everything and that I would not have to worry about anything. Andrew tried to phone me numerous times after we landed, but I ignored him. He didn't even know Abby's home address, so he couldn't show there. He kept messaging me, wanting me to answer the phone and tell him where I was, but I was too hurt to bother. After nearly 2 hours since our arrival, I decided to phone him back. We eventually had a chat. He was pretty panicked, and he informed me that for the last 2 hours, he had been waiting at the airport with all of the family's belongings, but we were nowhere to be found, and he had been worried sick about what had occurred. So I assured him that I was absolutely safe, and that the children were with me. I informed him that I was at Abby's house and that I did not want to see him for the remainder of the trip, and that as soon as we returned, I would file for divorce. When I mentioned that, he sounded astonished and informed me that I was overreacting and making a bigger issue out of it than necessary. He told me to come to the hotel and we could hash things out quietly, but I was not in the mood. I informed him that this one occurrence had made me understand how unjust things had been over the past few years. I also reminded him that since our daughter was born, he had stated that he needed a break and some time away from his family. Therefore, he shouldn't complain about the time he was given because he had requested it. He was furious and attempted to assure me that he hadn't said it that way, and he apologized if I had misinterpreted him. But he only meant that things had been extremely stressful at work since he was trying to provide for the family, to the best of his skills, and he simply desired some peace and quiet. Literally laughed out loud at that point and told him that I had felt the same way, but I had never tried to abandon or run away from my family, and that is exactly what he had done, despite knowing that I was unhappy with his decision. I informed him that I had always been more active in the housework and parenting our children than he had been. I had genuinely enjoyed taking care of everything because I knew we were family, and at the end of the day we would remain together. But after what he had done, I was no longer sure. He tried to pretend that he contributed equally, but this was not the case. I'm not sure how to explain it to you, but it was as if I was totally responsible for everything in the house, and I had to tell him exactly what to do before he would do it. We lived in the same house, and I'm very sure he was aware of some tasks that needed to be completed, such as getting groceries on time, purchasing items for the kids, or even washing the dishes or doing laundry. It sucked that I had to tell him to get it done because he wouldn't do it himself. I had explained to him countless times that he had free will. He could see what needed to be done and didn't have to wait for me to inform him, but he always had an excuse ready. He was always too tired from work to notice these things, and I had always accepted that excuse, but I felt he owed me at least one conversation before upgrading himself to business class and leaving us alone. On weekends, he was solely there to have fun with the kids. But when it came to training kids, teaching them what was right and wrong and disciplining them, he was almost never involved, and he always got away with being the nice cop and the fun father. Well, I had to do all of the truly hard work. I'd had these complaints against him for a long time, and I'd told him about them multiple times, but he always promised to be more aggressive. But nothing ever changed, and I was tired of waiting. For the past few years, I felt like a single mother whose spouse was only present on weekends as a fun relative, rather than the father of her children. I explained everything to him, and he promised to try to change, but this time I wasn't believing it. After the event at the airport, I no longer trusted him since he had pushed me too far. This time, I made it plain to him that I wanted him to be with us, but he abruptly ended the phone call, leaving me alone with our 2 children. So I told him he could now enjoy his trip on his own, while I would enjoy it in my own way. We were already going to go our separate ways, and when we returned, I was going to make sure we lived separately as well so he could have the space he so much needed. After that, I hung up, and Abby stated I did the right thing because it was clear that Andrew had been given numerous opportunities to change, but he had not. Following the phone call, Andrew continued to try to call me and even began texting me saying he was truly sorry and that he was going to rectify the matter. But all I needed to do was come to the hotel and talk to him in person. He kept telling me he would make things right, but all he needed was a chance to speak with me. After requesting me to come to the hotel several times, he informed me that he could meet me wherever I was. He only needed the address to Abby's residence, but right now, I really don't want to see him, so I've been ignoring the messages. But a few hours ago, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law, and she and I have never had any enmity. So I decided to pick her up, and she and my father-in-law were on the phone with me. They informed me that they had heard about whatever had transpired with Andrew and wanted to apologize to me on his behalf. I told him it was really good of him to do so, but it was between me and Andrew. They did not have to feel awful about any of it. However, they called me not only for this reason, but also because they had heard from Andrew that I was considering filing for divorce, and they simply wanted to suggest that I not do so because it would make it very difficult for them to see the kids as frequently as they did. Attempted to assure them that I would not prevent our children from seeing them. To be honest, I haven't even considered if I will petition for full custody. It's quite worrisome, and I'm not sure what I want to do right now. Anyway, I attempted to reassure them that everything would be all right, but they were panicked and began pleading with me to return to Andrew, saying that I should give him another chance. They stated we'd been together for almost 8 years and had simply reached a hard patch, so I shouldn't think about leaving him so soon. I knew exactly what to do before that phone call, but now, after hanging up the phone with his parents, I feel strange. Andrew has continued to email me, telling me to talk to him, and saying that he knows we can work things out because we've been together for nearly a decade and have gone through much worse, so we'll absolutely be able to figure this out as well. I think I may have overreacted since I can tell they're all trying really hard to convince me to go back to him. However, I believe what he did at the airport was completely unfair. So I stay despite threatening to divorce since my spouse upgraded to business class and left me alone with our 2 children just before a family trip. Update 1. Hi. So 3 days have passed since I arrived in Los Angeles, and I've been staying with Abby and her husband. They have graciously opened their house to me and have been a source of comfort at this difficult time. I've been sharing clothes with Abby, and the kids got some new ones for themselves. However, we can finally return to wearing our own clothing because I met with Andrew earlier today, and he brought our bags with him. Last night, after much thought and conversation with Abby and her husband, I ultimately chose to respond to Andrew. I gave him the address, and that was all. I said nothing else. I assumed that if he wanted to show up, he would arrive on his own and wouldn't need me to say anything else. Besides, with everything that had happened, I felt extremely embarrassed. This morning he arrived with the luggage and everything, and Abby and her husband decided to take the kids to a separate room. The children were overjoyed to meet him because they had been asking about him a lot. There was a lot of hugging and screaming, and I realized right away that even if I filed for divorce, I would never be able to convince myself to file for full custody because of everything. They appeared to be quite pleased with their father, and he seemed to enjoy being around his children as well. Anyway, once the kids were in a different room, we could finally converse. It was embarrassing, but he told me that he sincerely apologized for not being a better father and spouse. He said he hadn't really considered any of this to be a huge deal, but he hadn't been thinking about how I felt and had instead been thinking about himself, which was terribly selfish. He finally told me how much he loved everything I had done for the family and how hard I had pushed myself to make everyone happy. I told him that while these were lovely things to hear, I needed genuine and tangible change, and I had given him countless opportunities to do so, but he never took any of it seriously, and that is why we are in this predicament today. I told him that what occurred at the airport had really wounded me, and that I may have overreacted a little, but honestly everything just kept building up, and I couldn't deal with it any longer. I expected him to get defensive again, but instead he approached me, dropped on his knees, and took my hands in his own. That's when I realized I still loved him, no matter how he treated me, because the way he did it made me feel safe and that nothing horrible could ever happen to me. I began crying as he was on his knees, and he told me that he was deeply sorry and that he understood he had to stand up and be there for his family. He went on to say that so far, he had made his work his life, and that every time he returned home he was exhausted and concerned about the future, and he believed that whatever he was making was insufficient. He couldn't bring himself to think of anything else. He even admitted to taking anxiety medicine for the previous few months due to his high stress levels. I didn't realize that. He explained that he didn't tell me since he didn't want to concern me about these things. He admitted that he had fallen asleep at the wheel and was ashamed of it, but he only wanted one shot to make it work with me, and he promised me that it would be worthwhile and that I would not regret it. I was still crying when he said this, so he dried my tears and sat next me. And, as always, I rested my head on his shoulder, and we sat there for a few minutes. And I understand that this may not be a popular decision, but I decided to stay with him. I didn't care what other people said because I adored him so much. I don't think I'll ever love somebody in that sense, but I do love my children and want the best for them. So I told him I needed some time to think about things right now, and he said I could have as much time as I wanted. After that, we hugged and he returned to the hotel. I addressed matters with Abby, and she informed me that she has no counsel for me. She simply thinks I'm a good wife and even great mother. So she understands that I will do what is best for the family. After our chat today, I considered Andrew's point of view, and I suppose it must be difficult to be in a position like that because, while we both work, he has always been more anxious about his work than I have ever been. He comes from a family that has had to deal with really difficult problems since his father lost his work, and he struggled for a number of years when he was young, so he understands what it's like to struggle for money. And I suppose it explains why he was so focused on his work and nothing else. It is not an excuse, I understand, but it is what it is. Also, he had been stressed out for a long time and hadn't told me since he didn't want me to worry. It just makes me understand that we simply had a communication breakdown, and if we can resolve that, we might be able to move on. So, I'm going to think about it for a while and then see what happens. Update 2. Hi. So it's been a few days since I last updated. 2 days following our chat, I decided to go live with Andrew in the hotel where we had rooms. I finally escaped Abby's hair with my children. I thanked her for allowing me to stay with her and being there for me. She and her husband left me off to the hotel, and we've been staying together ever since. We figured the off dispute was causing the kids to be sad because we had promised them a fun vacation, and now we were staying separated, leaving them with little opportunity to have fun. So we're doing everything we meant to do, and the kids seem happier now that we're together. I still have a lot of unsolved concerns, but for the sake of the kids, we're trying to put those aside and just be there for each other as a family. I believe that being present for our children and ensuring their happiness is the most crucial aspect of our lives right now. He was correct. We've gone through far worse situations, so I believe we can get through this one as well. When I returned to the hotel with the kids, I informed him that I wasn't thinking about getting a divorce right now, but we still had a lot to work out. However, when I told him that I was no longer considering divorce, he hugged me, lifted me in the air, and did a full twirl in celebration. I don't think he heard the final part, and I didn't want to repeat it because I was laughing so hard. Anyway, he keeps saying sorry every morning and is doing his best to make amends for everything. I am literally being treated like a princess right now, and I have no concerns about his behavior at the time. If things continue at this rate, I may forgive him a lot. It was earlier than I had planned. Update 3, hi. So this update is just to address something that folks have been saying. I've been getting a continual stream of comments from a particularly vicious area, claiming that I'm a terrible mother and an idiot for getting back together with Andrew. I understand that some people may disagree with my decision to reconcile with him, but Andrew and I have been together for a long time. We've had our fair share of troubles, and what he did recently was wrong, but if he's willing to work on it, I'd like to give him a chance. I want to fight for our marriage, and I believe there is nothing wrong with that. Many women do it, and some of them have remarkable success. And I want to believe that I am one of those ladies because Andrew began changing shortly after our conversation. If he returns to his normal self, I know what to do. But for the time being, I want to keep our marriage intact, and I don't see anything wrong with that desire. The relentless bombardment of hatred that I've been receiving has broken my heart. Many people have accused me of being selfish for getting together with him, despite the fact that he is not a good father. I personally disagree with that. I believe he is a good father who is striving to improve, and that is what matters most. Anyway, we are nearing the end of our vacation, and things have been going quite well for both of us, so I had to break it to you. But all of you were mistaken. When we come home, we're going to start couples counseling, and I'm confident it will help us. The only reason I'm writing updates right now is to thank everyone who has expressed interest in my tale, and I wanted to learn more. So if some people truly believe that I am not destined to be with him, you are free to ignore my updates on this post, but please keep your cruel remarks to yourself because it is not worth it. Andrew and I are quite happy together, and our children benefit from that. Ultimately, we know what is best for our family, and I believe people should accept that. So if you're hoping for us to split up, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that won't happen. Update 4. Hello, everyone. Wow, it's been a long time since I visited Reddit. My last post was quite intense. I suppose that wasn't a real update. It was primarily a tirade about the vitriol I'd been getting. But I'm delighted to let you know that Andrew and I are still together. It has been 7 months since our vacation, and when we returned, we began looking for counselors near us and have been in couples counseling for the past few months. It's been working great for us, and Andrew has also reduced his work hours. He is more involved in the household and takes better care of the children than ever before. And he's no longer only there for the enjoyment, he is always there for them. He no longer brings the office with him when he goes home, which I greatly appreciate. It also feels like we've finally found each other after a long time. We have increased our date evenings and are attempting to reignite the spark because, while on vacation, we realized how much we loved one another. However, things have been so frantic and intense over the last few years that we have forgotten to express our love for each other. So we ask our parents to babysit the kids while we go out a couple of nights a month, because we believe there is more to life than work and children. And I suppose it was one of the reasons why things were going so wrong. Anyway, we've been actively working on our marriage, and Andrew has never been a better spouse or father. Most significantly, the children are happier than ever. And it is exactly what we both want. They are overjoyed to have their father around more, and every time I look at them, I feel like I made the right decision by sticking with him. Money will come and go, but in the end, we are all we have. I guess he was a little worried about the future, but we're going on another road trip in a couple of weeks, and this time it'll be much better. Our kids are really thrilled about it, and we're going to make sure that everything goes well this time. And you know what? Even if it isn't, we want to find a way to handle it as a family, because if the last few months have taught us anything, it's that we can accomplish everything we set our minds to as long as we have each other.